One beautiful afternoon, I had just gone out to buy a little something for myself to prepare for my beloved son's wedding after a long time of not shopping at all. I've always lived as frugally as possible, from food to clothing to take care of my son, but this was his wedding, so I wanted to have a lovely memory that day and, more importantly, I needed to preserve the dignity of my son and his wife. When I got home and cheerfully asked my son when the wedding would be held, my daughter-in-law sat with her legs crossed on the sofa, not even looking at me, and said coldly, "We got married yesterday, and we only invited important, high-class people." Those words made my heart drop into an abyss. My mind went blank. My ears rang. I thought about all the years of sacrifice, how I'd given up everything to provide the best for them, while I myself lived a bleak, frugal life. I thought again about what I'd sacrificed over the years. Even everything I had was spent to organize this wedding. Even the dress I had just bought came from money I'd been saving for a health checkup because I'd been feeling unwell lately. And yet, they treated me like that. I snapped awake and began to think about making them pay, little by little, for every wound they'd inflicted on me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave your thoughts on the story. For weeks, I had planned every detail. I set aside money as a wedding gift for my son. I called my sister Clara in Boston to share the good news. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, thinking that after the wedding, maybe they would stop by to celebrate with me. I imagined my son's smile, the pride in my eyes as I saw him grown, and the moment I could hold him in my arms on the most important day of his life. But that night, everything collapsed in a single moment. Max was on the other end of the line, his voice cold, as if rehearsed. "Mom, we already got married yesterday. Only special people were invited. Don't make this harder on yourself." I froze, my trembling hand dropping the phone. Just minutes later, the screen lit up with wedding photos flooding social media. Sophie in a radiant white dress, her parents raising champagne glasses in smug triumph, siblings hugging with bright smiles. And me, the groom's own mother, absent from every picture, as if I had never existed. I staggered to the closet, clutching the pale purple dress I had prepared for that day. Tears fell, soaking the thin silk fabric, each drop burning away the last shreds of my dignity. The next morning, the phone buzzed again. On the screen appeared a familiar name, Clara, my sister in Boston. "Send me the wedding pictures. I want to see them." My throat tightened. I lied. I guess they haven't sent them to me yet. The truth was, I had never been allowed to set foot there. I opened social media again, reading each word Max had written. "A special day with our loving family." My heart clenched. Loving family? Then what was I? I muttered under my breath. Am I nothing more than a walking wallet? The clock on the wall struck 12, its echo filling the room like a judge's gavel sealing my fate. I wanted to scream, to erase every image, but my throat was locked tight. No sound would come. In that moment, a chilling thought flashed through my mind. I raised a cold-blooded creature right in my own home. I collapsed onto the chair, clutching my head, feeling as if the entire roof was caving in. They had married, and I had been divorced from my own son's life. 2 weeks after that humiliation, the phone rang. On the screen flashed a familiar name, Sophie. My heart sank, sensing something ominous. I hesitated before picking up. Her voice came through, trying to sound sweet, but underneath was urgency. "Renate, the rent is overdue. The landlord threatened that if we don't pay this week, he'll throw all our things out. Mom, maybe you forgot to transfer the money?" I went cold. Just 2 weeks after the grand wedding with white gowns, champagne, and laughter, they were already broke. The truth was, I knew they had been behind on rent for months, hiding it with desperate pleas. All the money had been poured into that showy wedding, and as always, I was expected to be the one carrying the debt. My ears buzzed. My heart pulled me back to all those times I had rushed through the rain to the bank, breathless, praying I wasn't too late. All the times I canceled small trips for myself, living frugally on peanut butter and dry bread, just so they could be comfortable. All the times I thought I was holding the family together when, in reality, I was nothing but a walking wallet. Sophie's voice pressed on, now audibly trembling. "Mom, you always say we're family. We have to help each other." I took a deep breath, my hand clenching so tightly my nails dug into my skin. A cold line escaped my lips. Even I was surprised at the firmness in my voice. "Sorry, but I won't pay your rent anymore. If you treat me like an outsider, then take care of yourselves." A long silence opened, like a bottomless pit. I could hear her heavy breathing, and then suddenly, Sophie screamed, her shrill voice filled with panic. "You can't do this. If you cut us off, we'll lose our home." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone against my chest, letting memories flood me. All the times she had called me with a so-called medical emergency, only to post photos from the spa right after. The manipulations, the lies, the countless times they made me into a fool. It all came crashing down like a waterfall. I lifted the phone back to my ear, staring at my own reflection in the window pane. A completely different woman looked back at me, not trembling, not weak. I spoke firmly. "Family doesn't exclude each other on a wedding day. You did that. From now on, don't call me family anymore." On the other end, Sophie could only stammer a weak threat. "You'll regret this." I smiled coldly, hung up, and whispered to myself, "No, for the first time, it's not me trembling, it's you." I sat down at the table, opening my old expense ledger. The numbers piled up on the pages like undeniable evidence. For years, I had thought I was keeping the family afloat, but the truth was, I had turned myself into nothing more than a walking wallet. When Max was little, he once held my hand and promised, "I'll take care of you, Mom." That promise now echoed only as bitter mockery. I looked at the long string of red numbers: wedding dress, rings, honeymoon, overdue rent, and again those so-called emergencies. I added them up. The final number appeared, cold and merciless: $46,800. At one point, I even had to sell my wedding ring, the only thing left tied to those days of happiness with my husband. Staring into the empty drawer, I knew I had gone too far. Tears dripped onto the page. I lifted my head, looking at my husband's portrait. In my mind, a solemn voice whispered, "Renate, you raised wolves under your own roof." I threw the pen down on the table. The dry thud sounded like the slamming of a final door. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed. But it was no longer the cry of weakness. It was the cry of rage, of humiliation at having my dignity stripped away. That night, I sat in the dark, listening to the wind howl outside the window. I clenched my fists and whispered, "Enough. All these years are more than enough." The next morning, I woke up with a different feeling. It was no longer the pain of the night before, but a layer of ice covering my heart, making me sharper and clearer than ever. I walked into the bathroom and looked straight into the mirror. The same face, etched with deep lines from years of giving without receiving. But in those eyes, something new. Steel, shining, no longer clouded by tears. I whispered to myself, "Starting today, Renate will no longer beg for affection." I stepped into the kitchen, poured a cup of tea, the bitter taste snapping me awake. My eyes shifted to the note stuck on the fridge, the number I had calculated the night before, $46,800. It was there not to scare me, but to remind me how blind generosity had destroyed me. In the bedroom, the pale purple dress I had once prepared for my son's wedding still hung there. I folded it neatly, pushed it deep into the closet, not to wear it anymore, but to bury it. The phone buzzed. On the screen was Max's name. Before, I would have rushed to answer, hoping to hear some words of care. But today, I let it ring, then placed the phone face down on the table. Just one small act. But to me, it felt like a verdict delivered. The phone rang again this time. It was Sophie. A message appeared. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk." I read it, gave no reply, and didn't even keep it. I pressed delete immediately. Then I went into my contacts and changed Max's number to a short line. Do not answer. From now on, that would be my rule. I opened the drawer, pulled out the stack of old receipts. One by one, I tore them to pieces. The ripping sound filled the quiet room like the closing of a dark chapter. Outside the window, sunlight spilled brightly across the kitchen table. I sat down, inhaled deeply, and whispered softly, "Freedom begins with one unanswered call." That afternoon, I decided to go out. Not to rush to the bank before closing, not to stop by the supermarket to buy things for someone else, and certainly not to hurry to the pharmacy to pick up some emergency medicine for Sophie. Simply to take a walk because I wanted to, because I liked it. The path leading to the park was shaded by trees. I stopped, inhaling deeply the scent of fresh grass. For a moment, I remembered when Max was only 4 years old, clinging to me and whispering, "Mom, you're the best in the world." That memory collided with the present, bitter as ash. Had I raised a man, or only nurtured a debt? My steps stopped at the bank. This time, I walked in not as a rescuer. I lifted my head and spoke clearly to the familiar clerk at the customer desk. "I want to cancel all recurring transfers immediately." The clerk looked momentarily stunned. For 4 years, my transfers had been as regular as clockwork. He nodded, offered me a seat, and gently slid a tissue across when he noticed my hands trembling. But it was no longer the trembling of fear. It was the trembling of excitement, the thrill of freedom for the first time in years. I continued, my voice steady. "Change the e-banking password. Remove all outside access. I want this account to belong to me alone." He completed the procedure, stamped the forms. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing in my pocket. The names I had just changed appeared. "Do not answer, then Sophie." I didn't care. Calmly, I moved both numbers to the block list. The ringing stopped. A sweet silence I hadn't felt in years filled the air. Leaving the bank, a strong wind swept the street. I lifted my face, letting my hair fly loose, and smiled slightly. Yes, blow it all away. When I returned home, I went straight to the backyard. I cut a few lavender sprigs and some red roses, placed them in a glass vase, and set them right in the center of the kitchen table. Sitting down, I watched the petals tremble gently in the afternoon light. I smiled, then wrote a new list, taping it right on the tabletop. Take walks, read books, plant flowers, live for me. At dusk, a call came from an unknown number. I answered, only heavy breathing, then silence. I smiled, ended the call without a word. Under the sky that had already sunk into thick darkness, I called a technician to inspect for a new doorbell camera. A small barrier, but necessary. I knew the bigger battle was still ahead, but this time, I was ready. If this was a battlefield, then my front door would be the trench. The next morning, as I came down from the bedroom, I froze. In the living room, Max sat hunched on the chair, his head buried in his hands. Sophie paced back and forth, restless like a caged animal. And at the dining table, a strange man in a black suit sat comfortably, casually flipping through my personal documents. I snapped, my voice sharp. How did you get into my house? With an old key? Or with greed? All three turned to me at once, their eyes wide as if I were the intruder. Sophie forced a smile, her voice dragging out with false sweetness. Renate, thank goodness you're here. This is lawyer Kruger, whom we invited to discuss your situation. My situation? I let out a hoarse laugh. I'm perfectly fine. You're the ones who need a doctor. Max lifted his head, voice faltering. Mom, we just came from the bank. They said you canceled all the transfers, blocked our access. How could you do that without warning? You embarrassed us. I looked straight at him and answered curtly. Good. Embarrassment is the first step toward conscience. Kruger stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the table, his tone smooth. You just need to sign. Let your son and daughter-in-law take care of you, and everything will go more smoothly. I yanked the papers from his hand and tossed them back onto the table. The only thing you want to take care of is my bank account. He offered a pen, lips curling in a polite smile. I pointed it down onto the table firmly. I'm not signing. Sophie pretended to choke back sobs, eyes glistening with fake tears. Mom, you're old. Why keep the money? We know how to use it better. I shot back. I keep it, so I don't end up feeding wolves. Max cut in, voice weak. We just want to help you. This is a child's duty. I interrupted. Your duty is to give me back my dignity. Sophie's eyes darted toward the safe in the corner. I caught her glance immediately and pointed straight to the door. Out. One word, heavy with force. Kruger still tried to keep his smile, lowering his tone like a threat. Mrs. Richter, this is not over. They could petition the court to appoint guardianship. I lifted my chin, my eyes boring into him. What name will you give to a lawsuit born of greed? Max stepped closer. I backed up one step, phone in hand, finger poised over the police dial button. Sophie snarled, venom in her tone. Who do you think you are without us? I replied, every word clear. I'm the woman who just escaped you starting today. I flung the door wide open and gestured for them to leave. Max shouted one last line. You'll die alone. I answered slowly, firmly. Alone in peace is better than crowded in shame. Kruger bent down to gather the folder, his fake smile gone. Sophie stomped her heels furiously on the floor. Max followed behind in silence, his face heavy with despair. The door shut. I stood tall, filling my lungs with air. No collapse. Never again. The house seemed to exhale with relief. I called a locksmith to replace the locks. Then I picked up the framed photo of Max as a child, tucking it deep into a drawer, a ritual farewell. The boy I once knew had long since vanished. The living room sank into silence, but this time it was the silence of freedom. I returned to the dining table, spread out blank sheets, and listed step by step a plan, 1, 2, 3. Then I called lawyer Hartman, the one who had handled my husband's will. The moment he heard my voice, he immediately recognized the change in me and arranged to meet that very day. Hartman was known for being direct and relentless in defending the rights of the elderly. At exactly 1:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. It was Hartman. After hearing me recount everything, he clenched his jaw and declared firmly, "We are not going to defend, we're going to counterattack. This is elder financial abuse, a federal violation. The fact that they used old keys to enter your house and rummage through your private papers, that's illegal too." I nodded, my heart both heavy and light. Hartman laid it out clearly. You must document everything, receipts, transfers, pleading messages, turn memories into evidence. We spent hours reviewing every single expense. The cold number stood before us. $46,800, 4 years of rent, wedding dress, rings, honeymoon, along with all those fake emergencies. Hartman sighed. This money should have been for traveling, for enjoying retirement. Instead, you fed 2 grown adults so much that they stopped even pretending to respect you. My plan included: install a security system, open a new account at a different bank, change to a secure SIM, alert the bank to refuse any on-behalf transactions, buy a new safe for all important documents, draft a medical power of attorney, appointing a private doctor, not Max, and finally, begin living the life I had postponed for too long. At the security equipment store, Whitman, the familiar shop owner, looked surprised. "Another purchase for your son's house?" I shook my head, my voice resolute. "No, this time it's for my house. I need the best intrusion alarm system. Install it today." My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I hit record before answering. Sophie's voice came through, soft, pretending kindness. "Renate, please don't hang up. Let's make peace. We want to make it up to you. Invite you to dinner like old times." I cut her off. How much rent are you behind on? Silence. Then a faint mumble. 2 months. Et 500. I scoffed. Do you miss me, or do you miss my wallet? Sophie stumbled, her words broken. I spoke straight. For 4 years, you've turned me into an emotional ATM. You exploited me, humiliated me, and erased me from my own son's life. The game is over. I hung up and switched off the phone. On the way home, I stopped by the clinic for a full health checkup. For the first time in years, I went not because someone pushed me, but because I wanted to. Dr. Harris, an old acquaintance, reviewed my file and smiled. Finally, you're prioritizing yourself. I nodded, my voice firm. I had forgotten that I, too, deserve care. After the exam, I signed up for a senior wellness class. The trainer teased, "With that spirit, you look like a warrior." I answered, eyes bright. A warrior who takes care of her health is the only one truly free. Back at home, I replaced the old vase with a small potted plant, its fresh green leaves shining under the lamp. The room seemed to breathe with new life. As night fell, I sat in my armchair, sipping hot tea, warmth spreading through me. I whispered softly, "The more they call, the more I stay silent. And this time, my silence has the law behind it." The next morning, an unexpected visitor knocked on my door. It was Margaret O'Neill, the silver-haired neighbor who lived across the street. She carried a basket of warm pastries, her eyes gentle yet heavy with concern. "Renate," she said softly, "I've wanted to come speak with you for a long time. I've seen it all. The times you carried grocery bags for Max, then returned home with heavy steps. I stayed silent, thinking it was a family matter, but my heart has been uneasy. Today, I want you to know you are not alone." I froze. Her words weren't judgment, they were solidarity. They felt like a hand reaching out at just the right moment. I no longer had to question whether I was exaggerating my pain. I had a witness. I had the truth. At that very moment, Lawyer Hartman arrived, carrying a thick folder. He placed before me a document stamped with a red seal. "This is a temporary restraining order for 15 days, soon to be made permanent. From now on, Max and his wife are forbidden from coming near your house or contacting you directly. If they violate it, the police will be here immediately." Before I could breathe a sigh of relief, the phone rang. I put it on speaker. Sophie's voice came through, unusually soft. "Renate, do you really want to drag the courts into this? Max is falling apart. This is a family matter. If it spreads, your reputation won't stay intact either." I laughed coldly. "My dignity doesn't lie in my wallet, nor in flattering words. It lies in the fact that I dared to cut ties with those who exploited me." Sophie shrieked. "You dare do this to your own son?" Hartman intervened, his tone calm but firm. "Mrs. Sophie, from now on, all communication goes through my office. If you continue calling Mrs. Richter directly, you'll face contempt of court." The line went dead. I sat still, my heart pounding. Margaret O'Neill placed her warm hand on my shoulder, her voice steady. "Renate, you are no longer alone. If needed, this whole neighborhood will testify for you." Tears spilled from my eyes, not of sorrow, but of relief. For the first time, I was no longer the lonely woman fighting in silence. I had allies, I had the law, and I had the truth on my side. Outside, the wind scattered golden leaves across the street. I whispered, "This is no longer a prison. This is a fortress." After the restraining order, I thought everything was over. The days passed in peaceful rhythm, mornings watering the garden, afternoons sipping tea with Margaret O'Neill, evenings at the easel, and 3 times a week attending wellness classes. But it was only temporary. One morning, Hartman came to the house, his face heavy. He set his briefcase on the table, his voice grave. "Renate, Max, and Sophie have filed a petition with family court. They're asking to have you declared incompetent and for guardianship over your finances." The words landed like a slap. I knew they could go far, but hearing it as fact still made my chest tighten. If the court accepts, does that mean all my money would be in their hands? Hartman nodded. Yes, but don't forget, they must prove it, and we will dismantle every piece they present. He opened the file, pointing at the evidence they had submitted. Erratic behavior, a statement from neighbor Peterson. Failure to manage medication, a note from pharmacist Alvarez. Refusal of psychiatric evaluation, a preliminary report from Dr. Turner. Hartman smirked. All of it has holes. We'll drag each one into the light. We started with Peterson. The whole neighborhood knew him as a crank, always complaining about leaves from my tree drifting into his yard, about my porch light shining too brightly at night. Small things, blown into big issues. When Max and Sophie showed up with a bottle of liquor and promises to take care of those annoyances, he signed immediately. In his statement, he wrote that I acted strangely, turned the house into a fortress with cameras and alarms. That wasn't truth, it was just the grumbling of a bitter old man being manipulated. Next, Hartman took me to the pharmacy. Face to face, Alvarez blushed and admitted, "Your daughter-in-law asked me to print purchase slips for insurance. I only noted that you had no long-term prescriptions, just vitamins. I never meant it to say you weren't taking care of your health. I was deceived." Right there, Hartman drafted a new declaration, and Alvarez signed it, correcting the record. As for Dr. Turner, Hartman explained, he only noted that you refused evaluation. But refusal is a legal right, it does not mean incompetence. Besides, Turner is close to Sophie's family. We'll bring in an independent specialist. That afternoon, I met Dr. Morgan, a seasoned psychologist. She tested my memory, language, logical reasoning, financial management. I answered smoothly, from multiplication tables to itemizing monthly expenses. At the end, she smiled. "Mrs. Richter, your results are above average for your age. You are fully competent." Quickly, Hartman gathered everything. Videos of me shopping and driving, bank statements showing every transaction, receipts for Sophie's emergencies that matched the same days she visited spas and traveled, all neatly stacked in the folder. That evening, I sat staring at the pile of papers before me. Once, they were wounds. Now, they were weapons. I whispered, "They have lies. I have the truth." Hartman instructed me, his eyes firm. "On the day of court, just stay calm. Answer briefly, clearly. The truth will stand with you." I nodded. That night, I lay awake, not from fear, but from fire in my blood. I knew the real battle had begun. 2 weeks later, the fateful day arrived. I rose early and pinned Martin's golden brooch to my lapel as a talisman. A simple black suit, my hair neatly combed. The woman in the mirror was no longer trembling. Hartman arrived, opening the thick case file, his voice steady. "Remember this, Renat. The burden of proof is on them. We just need to show that you are competent." The trial began. The courtroom paneled in dark wood, the light solemn and austere. Judge Collins, known for being tough on elder financial abuse cases, struck the gavel. "Begin." The attorney for Max and Sophie stood up, speaking with polished rhetoric. "My clients only wish to protect their mother. Mrs. Richter has acted erratically, fallen under bad influence from outsiders, installed cameras out of paranoia, cut ties with family. We request the court to appoint guardianship to ensure her safety." Hartman rose, replying firmly, "Your Honor, do not confuse paranoia with autonomy. Cutting financial support is not incapacity, it is a boundary. They're witnesses." Sophie wept, insisting she treated me like a second mother. Hartman asked a single question. "When was the last time you called your mother-in-law without asking for money?" She choked, unable to answer. Hartman held up the enlarged wedding photo. "At a party with over 60 guests, where was the groom's mother?" Sophie stammered. The phrase, "only special people invited," was misunderstood. Hartman cut her off. "Is there any reasonable way to tell your mother-in-law she is not special?" She lowered her head, silent. Next was Max, voice trembling as he tried to stay calm. My mother changed. She stopped the transfers, made us ashamed. Hartman opened the ledger, flipping page by page. In 4 years, how much did your mother transfer to you? I don't remember. $46.8. Do you confirm? Yes. How many times did you visit her without asking for money? The room went silent. Max had no answer. Hartman concluded, You are 32 years old, yet still rely on your 6-7-year-old mother to pay your rent. Your Honor, who is truly acting erratically here? Peterson, the neighbor, testified that I turned the house into a battlefield with cameras, strangers coming and going. Hartman pressed, Have you ever spoken directly with my client? No. Your motive for signing? She caused trouble. Leaves blew into my yard. Hartman turned to the judge. This is not evidence, only personal annoyance. Dr. Turner stated that I refused evaluation, suggesting decline. Hartman brought in Dr. Morgan to counter. She presented her findings. Mrs. Richter scored above average for her age. Financial ability, memory, logic all intact. This is not decline, it is a textbook case of an elder defending herself against exploitation. My witnesses. Pharmacist Alvarez spoke honestly. Sophie asked me to sign papers for insurance. I only noted Mrs. Richter had no long-term prescriptions, just vitamins. I never intended it to imply she neglected her health. I was deceived. My testimony. I stepped up to the stand, looking straight ahead, my voice firm. I once thought I could buy love, but the truth is, I only bought lies. I stopped sending money not out of hatred, but to preserve my dignity. My money was welcome, but I was not. I do not regret stopping. I only regret doing it too late. The opposing lawyer tried to corner me. Isn't it true you've been manipulated by new friends? I smiled. No, for the first time, I have relationships that don't come with a transfer receipt. Judge Collins personally asked a few questions. Monthly pension income? $2,400. Fixed expenses? Edge, utven rent, van utilities, van insurance. He nodded, eyes showing approval. After deliberation, Judge Collins returned, his voice decisive. This court finds Mrs. Renate Richter fully competent. Her financial decisions are valid. The petition for guardianship is denied. Records show signs of exploitation from the petitioners. If it continues, this matter will be referred for investigation. Bang! The gavel struck. I exhaled, my chest lightened. Hartman gripped my hand, smiling. I told you, Renate, we don't defend, we counterattack, and we win. Leaving the courthouse, my steps were lighter than when I entered. Max and Sophie stood in the hallway, their faces etched with defeat. Sophie turned away, her heels striking coldly against the stone floor like the full stop to a failed deal. Max glanced at me, his eyes tinged with regret. But it was too late. I didn't respond. I just walked on, for that chapter was closed. That evening, my house lit up with laughter for the first time. Margaret O'Neill brought over a warm apple pie. Some new friends from the wellness class carried wine and scented candles. We raised our glasses to justice, to freedom, and to dignity that cannot be bought with money. I realized the joy wasn't only about winning the case, it was about winning against the fear inside me. In the months that followed, I changed little by little. I sold the old house not to escape, but to let go of heavy memories. I moved into a small apartment near the city center, with a balcony full of sunlight. There, I planted pots of geraniums. Each morning, their gentle fragrance reminded me, peace is something I create for myself, not something granted by others. I began doing the things I had once set aside, traveling, joining a volunteer group to cook meals for the elderly living alone. Quietly, I donated part of my savings to a fund that protects seniors from financial abuse. I didn't need anyone to know my name. I only hoped others could find a way out, just as I had. On my first day at the easel in my new apartment, I painted a pale purple dress flowing in the wind, the dress I had never worn to my son's wedding. Now, it was no longer a mark of shame, but a symbol of freedom. I later heard that Max and Sophie had to move into a smaller apartment, and that Sophie had taken a job for the first time. I felt no joy, no bitterness, only calm. Expensive lessons always leave scars, and now they had to pay the price of their choices. At night, I sat on the balcony, looking up at the star-filled sky. I no longer asked, "Why did my child become like this?" Instead, I whispered, "I still have time, and from now on, I will use it for myself." One evening, Clara called from Boston. Her voice was warm, proud. "My sister, I'm so proud of you. You stepped out from the shadow you once created for yourself." I smiled, drew the curtains closed, and slept without nightmares. I finally understood the enemy I had to defeat was never Max or Sophie. It was the weakness within me. And this time, I had won. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Somewhere out there, a mother, a father, or a grandmother and grandfather may be suffering in silence, and just by hearing these words, they will know they are not alone. And as for you, if you were in my place, excluded from your own child's wedding, treated like nothing more than a walking ATM, would you keep enduring it for the sake of family ties, or would you stand up for your dignity? Leave a comment, even just a short line, to share your thoughts. I truly want to hear your answer. Don't forget to hit like if you believe this message is important, and subscribe to follow the next series, Learning to Say No, where we will uncover the early signs of financial abuse within families so that no one has to pay the price too late. Here, we believe in one truth. Real love doesn't require money, but respect will always require boundaries. And I leave you with this. I'll see you again when you, too, are ready to choose yourself.